In this short video, I want to talk about tracking tools and tracking, because tracking, i.e. measuring, is like the most important foundational thing that we can be doing to understand our perimenopause, and the things that we do, the consistent actions that we take, are they helping or are they not helping? I have been a fan of tracking for a very long time. I actually started tracking my periods probably about 10 years ago. And the reason why I actually started 10 years ago was because I decided to come off the pill. I had done birth control for many years, and I actually wanted to use the rhythm method, which worked very successfully for me, not for everyone, but I just didn't want to be on birth control anymore. I came off that, and that's when I then obviously started having to track my cycle. I've been tracking my cycle for various different reasons, but I can tell you it is ridiculously helpful. It's ridiculously helpful because you start to become really in tune with the different seasons that we go through as a woman on a monthly basis. And I started to notice some patterns. I started to notice how if I was eating a lot of sugar, which used to be a real problem for me, I used to notice how that would have an effect on my cycle. And actually, I started experiencing night sweats when I was about 34, 35. And they would get really, really bad during my periods. When you start knowing when your cycle is going to start, there are a whole ton of benefits to just having a lot more insight into how your body is working. For perimenopause, if you want to get ahead of it, like I would recommend, and there are so many apps out there, I actually track my cycle on my Garmin. It fits in really, really well with what I'm about to talk about, which is Garmin. But I would definitely recommend that if you're starting in perimenopause or you want to get ahead of the game, start tracking your periods. It's just like such useful intel. And when you start tracking and you start to know where you're at in your cycle, some of those miserable things that happen to us, at least you can say, oh, I know why it feels like the whole world's gone to shit and I hate everyone and I hate everything. It's because I'm due on my period. I can honestly say it's something that I would definitely recommend. Track your cycle. So that's the first thing. Now, the second thing is my relationship with Garmin. I kind of once really upset an ex-boyfriend because I said to him, like, the only important thing in my life was actually Garmin. It was the only thing that was allowed to sleep with me every night. And I trusted Garmin with all of my personal information. I definitely recommend that you have some form of tool for tracking, whether that's a watch, whether it's one of the sleep rings, whatever it is. And the reason, again, why tracking is so powerful is because we can manage what we measure. And if we're not measuring it, it's very hard for us to manage. Honestly, do yourself a favor, do your future self a favor. If you don't have a watch or a ring or something, and you're starting to have these senses that things are shifting and changing, let's start measuring it. Let's start measuring it straight away. And there's also something really great for me about my Garmin, which is, and again, it's very easy to get obsessed with the data, and my friends will definitely tell you I am obsessed with the data. But it's really important to think about this as a trend. Are you trending up or are you trending down? Because your cycle is going to have, and this is where it's helpful to know where you're at on your cycle so you can see how these things are connecting. It's really, really helpful for you to understand where you're at in your cycle and then look at your metrics within context. Now, I am a big fan that context is everything. Context can always be changed, but if you know your context, it's like super, 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 super helpful to figuring out all of the rest. I use my Garmin, I wear it all the time, I train in it, I sleep in it, and honestly, my sleep score is something which actually it's pretty much the first thing that I do when I wake up in the morning. I look at my phone, it's in sleep mode, I flick down and I have a look at my night's sleep. Now, I do try and give myself like a little 2-minute pep talk before I look at my sleep score, because it's very easy for that score to then influence you for the rest of the day. So if I get a really bad sleep score, I don't know, maybe I won't train today. Whereas if I allow myself just 2 minutes to feel into my body, like how am I doing today, and then look at my sleep score. If there is a bit of a mismatch between how I'm feeling and the number that I'm looking at, I can give myself a little bit of a talking to and go about my day as normally as possible. I really, really recommend that you get yourself some kind of tracking device. Like I said, don't get completely obsessed with the numbers. Just use it as a really good guide as to whether you're going in an upward trajectory or a downward trajectory. And like I said, for me, everything starts with how I slept. I really do believe that sleep is the foundation of all things health, irrespective of whether you're in perimenopause or not. Once you've got a good read on your sleep, that can really help you understand where you're at for the day ahead in terms of training. I do really like to try and train 6 days a week. Sometimes my Garmin will tell me that I'm just not ready. But again, I really choose to listen to my body and how it's feeling before I make a decision. I absolutely love having 3 years worth of data now from my Garmin. And what's also interesting is like, I'm also always, not always, but I take a lot of pictures, and I take a lot of pictures in the gym. And that's another way for me to like visually track. Starting to see trends between times when perhaps, for example, Garmin tells me that my heart rate variability is unbalanced, and maybe I feel very stressed, and that then is reflected in my sleep score. And then when I look at pictures of myself, I'm like, maybe it looks like I'm kind of tired. I'm very sensitive to, the old lines around the face. Am I hydrated? All of those things really, really helpful just to get a read on what is it that I'm doing. What is it that I have maybe changed? Am I traveling for work? Am I exhausted because I've had a friend's birthday for the weekend, which is what's happened this week? Understanding all of those things and then looking at the data and making sense of those patterns and knowing then the things that work and the things that don't work. The other thing that I use are smart scales. Now, again, it's actually something that I've only really been using for the last year, and I didn't want to get too obsessed with the data on the scales. But again, as I said before, it's just very helpful, especially if you have specific goals, to understand whether you're trending up or whether you're trending down. I actually got my smart scales because I wanted to put on more muscle, and I got them probably about August last year. And the smart scales, they are not a DEXA scan. They are not fully trustworthy. They are, again, as I said, helpful as indicators as to whether you're on an upward or on a downward trajectory. My smart scales have been super helpful. I've seen that I've put on weight. I've seen that my body composition has been changing. And what's really, really interesting is that as those numbers have been going in a direction that I want them to go in, actually on Garmin, I have seen all of my metrics for running decrease basically. And I think that's as my body is starting to carry more weight and be more muscly. It's obviously got more to carry, therefore a lot of my metrics when it comes to running, even though volume-wise I'm still kind of doing around the same, I have seen things decline. We can't do everything, we can't be everywhere. I've chosen this year really to prioritize resistance training and to increase the amount of hours that I'm spending every week on strength, with a goal to build more muscle, because I know that that's super, super important for me to stay healthy and to stay fit and active and opening my own jars when I'm 80 years old. Priorities, goals, also really, really important. But if you're tracking, you understand how you're progressing towards those goals. Quick recap. Start off by tracking your cycle. If you're not doing it now, figure out the app that you want to use. Like I said, I'm using Garmin for that. Then find yourself a good tracking tool, whether it's a watch or a sleep ring, just so that you really understand some key metrics that you can follow to understand how you're progressing through your perimenopause. And then finally, some smart scales as well, just to complete the picture, basically. That's what I recommend. That's what I use. And then, of course, there's plenty of other things that you can do. So you could get a DEXA scan, and maybe you would choose to do that on an annual basis. I have also had my VO2 max tested in a much more like kind of formal way at a specific gym. And now I do get VO2 max on my Garmin, but it was very interesting to see what the difference was between those numbers. And then also blood work is really, really useful. And that's something that you can talk about with your doctor. Now, When I say blood work, it's useful for understanding overall general health. Perimenopause itself is very, very difficult to actually do a static blood test for, which has been talked about by lots of doctors and experts who can tell you far more eloquently the reason why. That is my opinion and my perspective on all things tracking, which if you're going into perimenopause and you want to stay ahead of the game, I definitely recommend you get started now. If you've learned something today, please hit the like button. If you didn't like what you heard, of course, you can always dislike. If you have questions or comments, please leave them below. If there are other tools and techniques that you're also using that I should be aware of, I would love to know that. Help the community out. Let's all share our knowledge. Please, comments below. And if you want to stay in touch, hit the subscribe button and you will see me popping up on your newsfeed at somewhere near you very soon. Anyway, have a great day. Thank you for listening. I hope this was useful and see you soon. Ciao.